Yeah, the brain is the most complex organ in the body. It's responsible for integrating sensory, environmental stimuli and incorporating it and integrating it into a meaningful, like behavioral or physiological response. So, because the brain's so important, you have these three protective layers on top, and these are called your meninges. Now, the outermost meningeal layer is the dura mater, okay, or it's called, like, I think it stands for tough mother, or means tough mother or something like that. Anyway, the dura mater, and then associated with the dura mater is the arachnoid mater, which is a much thinner layer that's underneath that. Now, if I ask y'all what the structure is, just tell me it's the dura mater, okay? Then attached to the brain itself, you have your third meningeal layer, which is the pia mater. Pia mater is thin and delicate, but it's intimately linked to the brain. So the reason I can't stick my probe in here is because there's pia mater covering the entire thing. So, the main region of the brain, the main structure of the brain is the cortex. The cortex is this whole region full of gyri and sulci. Now, think about this as a mountain range, okay? So your ridges, your mountains are going to be your gyri, and the sulci, the grooves, these are going to be your ridges, or your valleys in between the mountains. So you have your gyri here and your sulci in between. So the gyrification and the sulci, they help you orient yourself and help you discern regions of the brain. So you have your longitudinal fissure here. A fissure is just a deep, deep sulcus. This longitudinal fissure is going to separate your brain into the left and right hemispheres. Okay, so a hemisphere is just half of the cortex. And now your central sulcus, which is the only other sulcus whose name you have to know, it's right here. So you can see it right at the longitudinal fissure. It's distinct. And so if you just follow it over to the sides, that's going to be your central sulcus. This separates your frontal from your parietal lobes. So your frontal lobe here, which is everything in front of your central sulcus, is important for complex thought, abstract reasoning, personality, problem solving. All the complex thought processes that mammals have is because of the because of frontal lobe. Now, you have your parietal lobes here. It's important for processing and storing sensory information, like from your body. So like heat and cold and touch and things like that is all stored and processed here in these regions. Now your central sulcus is going to separate two major functional regions that you have to know, and that's your precentral gyrus and your postcentral gyrus. Your precentral gyrus is this region right before the right before the central sulcus, okay? And it's important, it's your primary motor cortex, so it's important in initiating motor function. And then behind that, you have your primary somatosensory cortex, okay, which is your post-central gyrus. So it's right behind, post-central gyrus, right behind the central sulcus. And that's important for storing most of your sensory information. Now you have your temporal lobe here on the side. Your temporal lobe is important for processing auditory information as well as generating speech. Okay, so those are your temporal lobe. Now you have your occipital lobe here in the back. Your occipital lobe is important for processing and storing visual information. Okay. Now, I'm gonna go through the nerves. Alright, so there's 5. You're supposed to be able to identify 6 of them. I can never find the trochlear nerve. It's very thin, very delicate, comes off very easy. So, first 6 minus the trochlear. So, you have first and foremost your olfactory bulbs, okay, your olfactory nerves. And the information is sent back on the track. So in the very front of the brain, you'll have a nerve, and then taking the information back to its associated its proper cortical region will be a track. Okay, so olfactory bulb, olfactory tract. Here you have the optic nerves and optic tracts. So this whole complex makes an X. Okay, so the front of the X, which would be up here, this is gonna be, which it's not, but if you see here, the X comes out all the way over to here. Okay. So this should extend much further. Alright. So this front region up here, this is your optic nerve. So that sends or receives the visual information. And then at the X, where they cross, this is the optic chiasm. This is where the medial fibers from your optic nerves cross over. And then behind that optic chiasm is your optic tract, and that's what's going to take the information back to the occipital lobe to be processed and stored. Now, cranial nerve number 3 is your ocular motor. Okay, it looks like a fettuccine noodle. Alright, it's just a flat nerve. Your ocular motor nerve, sorry guys, there's too many that start with O's. Ocular motor nerve is important for executing eye movements. Number 4 is trochlear, that's the one you can't find, but if it were here, it would come off as a branch off of the trigeminal, which takes us to number 5, which is the trigeminal. That's this nerve right here. It's important for chewing and tongue movements, jittering speech with your mouth and things like that. And then number 6 is your abducens here. Okay, it's also eye movement. So you have 4 of your cranial nerve. 4 of the first 6 cranial nerves are associated with the eye. Optic nerve is a sensory neuron, a sensory nerve. Okay, it's gonna send sensory information to the brain. But your ocular motor, your trochlear, and your abducens are all motor nerves. So they send information to the eye, causing them to move. Okay. So that's all the nerves. So then you have your pituitary gland. You can't see it on this one because it's held on by a thin stalk called the infundibulum, and I swear the infundibulum is probably not much thicker than this. So when you remove the dura mater, the pituitary comes off. But this is the dura right here. The pituitary right here. So this hole right here is where the infundibulum would go and where the pituitary would associate on the outside. Behind that, these little bumps right here, this is the mammillary bodies. The mammillary bodies are important for processing or helping process olfactory information. Then behind that, this region here is the cerebral peduncles. Cerebral peduncles just kind of hold the cortex to the brain, make sure everything stays in place. Then behind that, you have the pons here. The pons is the bridge, so it contains fibers that connect the whole brainstem to the rest of the brain. It has a couple other functions, but pons is the bridge. Then you have the medulla oblongata. The medulla is the most important part. It regulates most, if not all, autonomic functions like heart rate and breathing, the ones that are crucial to survival. So if you sever this, you'll most likely die. And then flipping it over, we're going to look at the colliculi. So you have the superior and inferior colliculi, superior on top, inferior on the bottom. These are all important for reflexes, but these two are important for visual reflexes. The superior colliculi are associated with visual reflexes. So if you hear like a loud bang out the corner of your eye, you turn to orient yourself, or you shift your eyes that way. If you see something move out the corner of your eye and you orient your eyes that way, it's a reflex by the superior colliculi. Same thing with auditory. If you hear something and you look over without actively thinking about looking over there, it's a reflex initiated by the inferior colliculi. So inferior auditory, superior visual. And then what should sit above this, but it's not, so I'm actually look at your brain and see if it's in here, which it is on top of the superior colliculi is the pineal gland or the pineal body. Pineal body produces melatonin, which is important for regulating sleep-wake cycles and circadian rhythms. Now you can also see the pineal body from the half brain, and it sits on top of the superior and inferior colliculi. So you see superior here, inferior here. That's your pineal gland here, okay? Now I'm going to do your ventricles. So you have 4 ventricles. You have 2 lateral ventricles, 3rd and 4th ventricle. Your 2 lateral ventricles, one's here, and then one would be in the other half of this brain. CSF is produced here by the choroid plexus that lines it. Now you can't see the choroid plexus here, but it's like a darker reddish, brownish color because it's mostly blood vessels. And then you have your 3rd ventricle here, which surrounds the thalamus. Then you have your cerebral aqueduct, which takes CSF from the 3rd ventricle to the 4th ventricle, and the 4th ventricle is associated with the colliculi and the cerebellum. Okay, can y'all see that? All right, so lateral, 3rd, cerebral aqueduct of Sylvius, and then 4th. So then the roof of the 3rd ventricle is the corpus callosum. It contains axon fibers that connect the 2 hemispheres together, allowing them to communicate. The floor is the fornix. This thing, fornix means floor, literally. Thalamus is a relay station, so it processes and sort of filters a lot of information coming up from the brainstem. And then the hypothalamus is right below it. The hypothalamus is important for regulating like behaviors that are necessary for survival and reproduction. So like food intake, water intake, sexual reproduction, things like that. Governed by the hypothalamus. And then the arbor vitae of the cerebellum here. Arbor vitae means like tree of life. So this white tree-like substance in here, that's your arbor vitae. And that is it.